Kingston Town can't win.
Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star, stride for stride.
Cometh the hour, cometh the legend, Winx has done it.
So we're joined by the Moonee Valley Racing Club CEO, the Chief, Michael Browell. Michael, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So let's take it back to the very beginning. We know everyone has a different entry into how they fell in love with racing. What was yours?
I grew up in the racing industry back in Bendigo. I had a family connection, an uncle that was the leading trainer in the Northern District. He had a couple of really good horses when I was young, horses like Marla. Jet Fighter was a great sprinter. And my father, he was a hobby trainer, so trained horses when I was young. Took a break, and then I'm going to say I was 14 when he decided to get back into it. And the first horse that he took on after his break was a really good horse called Fair Ross. He won here at the Valley. I think he won 6 out of his first 10 starts for us, won a few country cups, and that's what ignited the passion, I think.
So you first began here in 2008, coming from Mornington. So what attracted you, I guess, to this role? Coming from Mornington, what attracted you to come into the Valley? Yeah,
it was a progression. I started off at the Bendigo Jockey Club when I was 23 back in 1995, and that was a really good apprenticeship under the chief executive there, Paul Shawble. And country clubs, it's a small team. There was 3 of us in the office there, and you get to do everything. So it's a great way to get involved in racing administration. You get across programming, but there was also the hospitality side of it, dealing with committees. Bendigo was a training centre as well. So it was a good grounding. There was an Irishman that started a week before I did at Bendigo called Pat McAvoy. He was the track manager, and Pat headed off to Mornington, I'm going to say 2006 or 2007. And I got a phone call on the night of the opening ceremony of the Sydney Olympics. Pat rang me up to tell me that the chief executive had stepped aside and thought I should have a crack. I was 28 at the time, and I was almost finished building a house in Bendigo. But I threw my hat in the ring. Pat put in a good word for me. Frank Sedgman, the tennis legend, was coming in as the chairman at the time, and I was fortunate enough to get the chief executive role. I ended up spending 7 nights in the house in Bendigo, then sold it and relocated down to Mornington.
And you mentioned that it was a smaller team going from Bendigo and Mornington to the Valley. What were some of the other bigger differences coming to a metro club, one of the big 3?
Yeah, it's the quality of racing. I was really fortunate in my time at Mornington. I got there at the right time as well. There was a big sponsorship contract that had been signed with CUB. They had the gaming venue up and running, and they had a great program of race dates across that summer period. People down on the bay, down there for their beach holidays, and we had a really solid racing program. And in my time there, we had Gunner Matter come through and win 3 Mornington Cups. That tied in with a grandstand renovation that we had. So it was a really good time to be involved at the club. But when the opportunity came to shift up here in 2008, I was excited to get the opportunity. What was I, 36 at the time, to become the chief executive here. The Cox Plates, the greatest race in the country from where I sit. I love the night racing side as well, and I saw that there was a lot of opportunity to build on the success that the club had previously.
So 2008 to 2022, it's a great stint as a CEO here. What has been for you like when you first started here in 2022, the things that you've been most proud to deliver? Yeah,
I think on the racing side of it, seeing Winx win 4 Cox Plates was a great thrill. I've been fortunate in my time here at the club, and for me, first and foremost, it's the passion for racing. I love the great racing we have here, the big Group 1s, the champions we have come through. And I can say in that 14 years, we've had four champions race here at the Valley. Winx, of course, with her 4 Cox Plates. So you think 1, 2, he could have easily won 3 or 4 had he have stayed in the country. The Black Caviar era was just incredible. The final Victorian start that she had here in March 2013 was a night that none of us will ever forget. 25,000 people here. It was just an incredible event. And Nature Strip, he came through and won a Moya Stakes as well, and he's gone on. We haven't seen him back here often enough, and I'm not sure if we will, but off a Moyer Stakes win here, he's gone on to become an absolute champion. Then you've got horses like Liz Grishu. She that one step down. I think we only saw her once in the country buffering. So yeah, from the racing point of view, been fortunate to see those 4 champions. Off the racetrack, I think the redevelopment here, the Moonee Valley Park project, the realignment of the track, it took a long time to get to where we are now. It's been 10 years since we lodged the rezoning application. But we've got great partners with Host Plus and Hampton, and completed the first release only a couple of weeks ago. Personally very satisfying to achieve that project milestone and see residents moving in, but it's the next projects within that Moonee Valley Park redevelopment that should be incredibly exciting.
We might add that Benny and I up there at the list of the appointments, and the we'll compare that to the $2 billion redevelopment as the high points of your time as well, MB. Benny?
And just on the flip side of that, what have been some of the greatest challenges you've faced as a CEO, and perhaps things that haven't gone right?
Well, when I first arrived here, I arrived in August 2008, and that was right on the cusp of the GFC. And at the time, nobody really knew how damaging it would be. We managed to get through that, and there wasn't a great impact to the club or the industry. That was just after equine influenza as well. But when I was at Mornington, we had that challenge. In more recent times, COVID's had a massive impact. It's been fantastic, and racing's been incredibly fortunate to continue through those lockdowns. It's been a very tough 2.5 years. We haven't had a crowd at a Cox Plate carnival since 2019. So I think that would have to be the biggest challenge that we've had.
Going back to racing, you touched on a little bit there how racing's kind of is at the moment. With the current state of play in racing, how do you see it in this country?
Racing's incredibly strong. Prize money on offer, I think, this season across the country is 800 million plus. You'd have to say the breeding industry's never been stronger. There's more people involved in racehorse ownership. One positive that came out of COVID with the lockdowns, people are more engaged with racing as a sport. The audience has grown, the engagement levels have grown. All the key metrics are up. We now need to get people back to the races. There's some challenges, of course, in the programming space between Victoria and New South Wales at the moment. And I think when the time comes that the two states can get back and sit down around the table and sort through it, I don't think there's anything insurmountable. I think if we take a common sense approach, we should be able to work the program that's now in place to the benefit of all industry stakeholders. I'm very passionate about the best taking on the best. I want to see the strongest fields possible, whether that's in the traditional black type Group 1 races or even some of these new pop-up races. I think the two can coexist, but it just needs a little bit of tweaking on the fringes.
We know the Moonee Valley Racing Club has always been at the forefront of innovation. We were the first to introduce night racing back in '98. Just elaborating, what have been some of the developments that you've been most proud of?
I think one of the interesting ones was the Ladbrokes 55-second challenge, and that came about. We had a racing manager previously, Alex Doble, and the challenge we had was increasing field sizes, and Alex came in one day and said, well, if you have a look at the trials each week over 800 metres, like there's 100 horses trialling over 800 metres every week. Why don't we run 800-metre races? And I discounted that very quickly. I said, it's just not possible. But I went home and thought it through and got the calculator out and worked out the math, picked Miss Andretti's 1,000-metre record here and started to work back from there. And we arrived at 955 metres and 55 seconds. So I think we're now in the 12th season of the 55-second challenge. It's a $1 million promotion across the night racing season. And I think across the journey, there'd only be 5 or 6 horses that have broken that 55-second mark. And you need everything to go right to be able to break that mark. The other one, of course, would be the 2-day Cox Plate Carnival. We launched that in 2012, and that was on the back of Black Caviar racing across at Royal Ascot. We sponsored the national telecast that night, and we had full-page ads in all the major newspapers announcing the launch of the 2-day Cox Plate Carnival. And the plan was, we thought she would win comfortably. The connections would come back because they'd missed the breeding season. They would come back and they would say her first up run will be back at Moonee Valley on Cox Plate Eve. So we wanted to effectively double the capacity here. We always have a big crowd on the Saturday, but if we put the big Group 1 sprint race on the Friday night, 2 bites at the cherry. And as we all know, she fell in, won by a lip. She was injured. But then when they didn't decide to send her to stud, that's when we started building our plans for the William Reid Stakes night. And we all love it when a plan comes together. She came back, of course, at Flemington. We brought the nominations closing forward for the William Reid that night, and we got her in a month out. We had a money-back guarantee. We sold the tickets in 72 hours, and it was just an incredible night. But, yeah, it's interesting. Without Black Caviar going to Royal Ascot, would we have a 2-day Cox Plate Carnival? I'm not sure. But you have a look with the sell-out Winx years, and, yeah, we've had some incredible 2-day carnivals. It's a big 24 hours, and the team do an incredible job here to pull it all together.
Just to touch on Black Caviar, that night here, I wasn't here, but I mean, I've seen the photos and the videos of it all. Can you just kind of encapsulate what that was like to be here on that night with the 25,000 here in her last race here?
It was an electric atmosphere. I don't think there was any doubt that she was going to win. It was a small field. She had them covered. She only had to turn up really and do the Black Caviar thing and she'd win. But it was a real celebration. Yeah, football's tribal. You see a game of football, 50% of the crowd will barrack for Team A, 50% will barrack for Team B. You don't normally get that sort of fan engagement or support for one horse on a card, but every man, woman and child that was here that night was here to see Black Caviar. And we celebrated her story. We acknowledged her owners, the breeder, the trainer, the strapper, the jockey. The only thing out of the event plan that we didn't get through, we wanted to have a saddlecloth done up, which I think, I should know this off the top of my head, was it 25 wins in total, but that was her 24th win. So I think we had a saddlecloth done up in the sponsor's logo there. We wanted to make application for her to carry that saddlecloth in the race, but the connections weren't keen to jinx it, if you like. So she carried, I think it was saddlecloth 6 from memory, and then Luke Nolan's helmet got knocked off after the race from the winner's enclosure. But yeah, I've never seen that electricity, that atmosphere on a racecourse before. And I said to the team, I got them in on the Monday, and I said, as long as you work in racing, you'll never experience anything like we experienced on Friday night again. You know, enjoy it for what it was, and it's a career high. Little did we know that there was a little horse coming through called Winx.
So Winx was also wearing saddlecloth 6 when she won the 4th Cox Plate, so there's a bit of similarities there.
I'll have to check. The memory's not as good as what it once was, and I'll blame COVID. You know, I've lost all reference points on that. But, yeah, I'm not sure if she carried saddlecloth 6 that night. But, yeah, the Winx era, that'll live forever here. And you know, as we're about to realign the track, you know, it's the dawn of a new beginning, if you like, here at the Valley. But the statue of Winx 4 out the front, that'll be the gateway to the Valley for the next 100 years.
So we go to your second year as CEO at the club. So you think is coming off a 5th place effort in the Caulfield Guineas. It's hard to imagine that a couple of years later he's a champion, but he almost didn't gain a start in the Cox Plate. Do you remember some of those conversations in the committee deliberation?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Cox Plate to this day is the only race in the country where the committee has the discretion to determine the final composition of the field. And my first experience of that was 2009. We're always tracking the progressive acceptances to work out who is planning on coming through on that Tuesday morning for the final acceptances. And 10 days out, we look like having potentially 17 or 18 in the mix, and So You Think was one of those. He'd had the one win up in Sydney, won the Gloaming, but he'd had 4 career starts. the Cox Plate turned out to be his 5th. But it was about 10 days out from the Cox Plate. Maldivian, the previous year winner, went a miss. So I think he had a suspensory or a tendon injury there, so he's out. And then it got down to the Monday of Cox Plate week, and we had 15 horses contesting 14 spots. And on the order of entry, if you like, So You Think was 15, and we could have had him as the first emergency. But there was a New Zealand horse called Sir Slick. And again, the memory's not as sharp as what it was, but I think he might have been a 14-time Group 1 winner across in New Zealand. He was one of the great New Zealand horses, and he was down at Brett Scott's property. And the stewards went through and vetted all the horses on the Monday before the acceptances on the Tuesday, and it came out he had a hoof issue. It might have been a stone bruise or a corn or something coming through, an abscess coming through. So at 4 o'clock on the Monday, before the Cox Plate, Sir Slick is ruled out. But we had contacted Bart Stable and strongly suggested that they nominate the horse for the Vars. And Bart, the feedback was this is the best horse Bart's ever put a saddle on. You've got a strong relationship with Chin Nam. We think the horse has done enough to warrant a start in the Cox Plate. He got in, the rest is history. He came back the following year, 2010, and then sold for a reported $50 million to head across to Europe and win 5 more Group 1s for Aidan O'Brien.
That's probably a good leading question to the next one I'm going to ask you around the just before the 2010 Cox Plate. There was a slight incident on course that might have caused a few waves if it had come off, but you quickly hurried to the rescue. Did you want to maybe just elaborate on what that story looked like? It hasn't really been told outside these 4 walls, so
I think it's in Bart's book, to be honest. The way that the mounting yard works here, the horses parade, we have the national anthem out the front, we have Darryl singing his songs, and then at the end of the tunnel near the track there, we get a signal when Darryl's finished for the horses to come through. So the first horses are coming through. So You Think he's sort of midfield, I think, to come through the gate. Stevie Arnold on top, and he's on his toe. He knows that it's match day. And just as he's come through the tunnel, the crowd's encouraging Darryl to do an encore. And just as So You Think comes through the tunnel, the guitarist with the speaker coming back to the tunnel goes to start the encore. And just this massive wave of sound just hits So You Think. And we've got the glass barricade or the glass fence around the deck bar there. He almost jumped into the fence. He was that worked up. So I've had to run out on the track along the old rubber rock there, and it gets longer as the years go past, but it was a decent throw, and the race books are pretty thick on Cox Plate Day. I've thrown the race book at the bloke who's got the controls, and it's just got him smack bang in the middle of the head. It was like JFK, not quite like JFK, but it's got him smack bang on the middle of the head, and he's turned around, and I've just given him the cut it signal, and he cut it, and So You Think they got him back under control, got him to the barriers. But we could have had the $1, I think he was a $1.50 favourite that day. We could have had the $1.50 favourite scratched 5 minutes before the Cox Plate because Darryl Braithwaite wanted to do an encore.
And that's is that the reason why Darryl's not? I'm kidding.
We've had many more years with Darryl.
We have.
You mentioned you've seen some great champions in your time. The number you put it is 4. What are some of your favourite races and perhaps your all-time favourite Cox Plate?
For me, I grew up with Manikato and Kingston Town. The King and the Man, that video that was done, I would have watched that 1,000 times. Kingston Town, his 3rd Cox Plate win in 82. And you get an appreciation for the history of the race as well. And I look back, Kingston Town winning 3 was incredible. But what would have happened if Dulcify had have come back after his romp the year prior in 1979? It would have been an incredible match race between Dulcify and Kingston Town. So the way fate worked, Kingston Town had an opportunity to win 3, and his 3rd win was just incredible. And the big difference between his 3 and Winx's 4 Winx was effectively injury-free throughout her career, but if you read the Kingston Town story, he was an old croc. He'd get patched up after every campaign. He didn't race in a couple of autumns, and Tommy Smith, he when he was right, he just raced him and raced him and raced him. Tommy had a philosophy that they can't win prize money sitting home in their box, so he wasn't wrapped in cotton wool at all. But, you know, the Bill Collins call, Kingston Town can't win, that makes it as well. And for me, you know, the other one has to be Bone Crusher, our Waverley Star. That's just an iconic moment in Australian sport. It transcends racing. The race of the century, you know, as long as they're racing horses in this country, Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star that day will go down as one of the greatest of all time. And again, you know, Bill Collins, Bone Crusher races into equine immortality.
Now, the Cox Plate race, obviously, we know it's such a special race. It's the centenary year of the race this year. What makes the Cox Plate such a special race?
I think it's the honour roll. Yeah, we're fortunate enough every day we walk out of the lifts here down into the octagonal lounge there, and you've got that winner's wall. And there's just champions across 100 years that are represented on the honour roll of the Cox Plate. They've all got great stories. You don't get that in handicap racing. You don't get that in any other race in the country. Yeah, people could go through and recall many Melbourne Cup winners or Caulfield Cup winners, Golden Slippers, you know, and the like, but the absolute champions that have graced the turf here in this country in the past 100 years are represented on that wall. And Moonee Valley's a quirky track. You know, it's very unique, but somehow the best horse finds a way to win each year.
My last question is, do you have a tip for this year's Ladbrokes Cox Plate?
I think Adamo is something very special. He's fully furnished now. He's come back and he's won his 2 Group 1s this campaign. It's good to hear that he's bounced back now from his post-race lameness after the George Main Stakes. I think if he gets here on Cox Plate Day and he's 100% fit, I think he's winning. Unfortunate not to have won last year on the track and then in the steward's room. I'm not going to take a position on the protest. You know, it was a 50-50 and it went the way of the Irish Raider, but I'd love to see Godolphin also on the winners list, on the honour roll for the Cox Plate. I've been across to Dubai and I've seen the trophy museum, if you like, that Godolphin have got across there, and you know, there's one glaring omission, and that is a WS Cox Plate.
Certainly hitting form at the right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, they've got the right horse this year, and they might have another one waiting in the wings, Golden Mile. The other thing, of course, we love with the Cox Plate is when we get a late nomination fee. You know, we've knocked a couple back in my time here, and there have been a few in that 14-year period, and having seen what he did at his last start, you know, if Godolphin elect to pay the late nomination fee, I think he'd be a big chance. We always do like a high-quality 3-year-old to come into the Cox Plate.
I had just a couple more for you, Chief. So we spoke about innovation before, and we're obviously the centenary year. We've done something a bit different here, and we've launched our own set of Cox Plate Centenary NFTs. Did you want to give us a little bit of detail on those and what punters can kind of expect when they purchase one? Yeah,
we had the conversations internally about the NFT promotion back when cryptocurrencies were a little bit stronger, and things have sort of tanked a little bit in that space over the past 6 months. But you know, NFTs and cryptos, they're not exactly interchangeable. It was important to celebrate the centenary of the Cox Plate. We've gone through and picked out the greatest of all Cox Plate champions, and we've offered the NFTs, which is a collectible item there that club members can, or anyone can jump on the website coxplatenft.com.au and pick up a piece of history. It's got the profiles of those champion horses, you know, their key stats, some race vision as well, and then also too there's benefits that are attached to those NFTs that relate to special events, money can't buy experiences, and of course attendance opportunities here across the carnival. So jump on the website. There's something for all budgets. You know, you've got the limited edition Legendary Series, which are one-offs, but then there's more that come down into the champion and the heroic categories. But it's a nice little collectible for yourself or for a loved one, a unique gift this year for the centenary of the WS Cox Plate.
And we've got the Group 1 Charter Cat Cramer Moya Stakes this Friday night. It's a strong field. Have you got a tip for this Friday?
We've only just done the acceptances this morning. I haven't seen the barrier draw yet, so pending a favourable gate, I'd love to see Rothfire come back and win. A great story. Fantastic to see him win here. The McEwen Stakes back on the 3rd of September. The trainer, Rob Heathcote's a great friend of the Valley, back through his buffering days. He's nursed the horse back from what could have been a career-ending injury. It was almost 2 years to the day since the horse had won previously. But if he gets back to his absolute best, I think he's a future Group 1 winner. He'll run well here, and then perhaps he'll be even better over the 1,200 metres in the Ladbrokes Manikato Stakes in 4 weeks' time.
And you touched on before, obviously we haven't had crowds here for spring for the last few years. How excited are you to have, you know, that Valley roar back and our crowds and members back on course this year? It's
been a very sad experience being here for the last 2 years. Normally there's 20 to 30,000 people here for Cox Plate Day. The last 2 years we've had 20 to 30 people. So we never want to go back there. We got close each year to having crowds here, but we missed out. So we haven't had a crowd since 2019. Looking forward to the electricity, the atmosphere, you know, the amphitheatre that is the Valley. You know, it's great what happens out on the track, but you do need the grandstands packed and the lawns full to give it that full experience. So with the reduced footprint, we're targeting a crowd of, you know, let's say 23,000 people, and we're well on the way to selling every available ticket and every available package, and looking forward to an incredible 2022 Ladbrokes Cox Plate Carnival.
And last one, we have asked all our guests on the pod here, because we do have a lot of punters listening, your best punting story personally, or one you've heard?
My greatest horror story was declaring to everyone that Awesome Rock would win. I think it was the 2016 Australian Cup, and backing him like he was unbeatable at 26-1, but betting with cash at the course on the day and not getting the benefit of the protest payout. So that's still a horror story. I've had some good wins. The one that probably jumps out, I've owned a few horses and had a bit of luck, and I had a good run. It must have been the summer of 2008, I think. And there was some money in the account. I'd never bet on tennis in my life. But at the end of the first week of the Australian Open, I had a really good bet on Novak Djokovic to win the Australian Open. So I didn't realise that he'd had health issues, or he didn't get through Grand Slams. He had some challenges there, and he ended up winning in 4 sets. He beat Songa to win the Australian Open. So I turned enough into a lot, and then I had a horse that was getting prepped for a Warrnambool jumping campaign, having a first up run at Yarra Glen the next day. And Brett Scott trained it, and he was able to ride it that day. I don't even know what they called those races with the jump stockies, but something like that. But managed to head out to Yarra Glen, and I had all my winnings from Djokovic, and I went through the whole betting ring and had a lot with each of the bookmakers on this horse to win. It started at 250, and he ended up well and truly in the red, and he got the cash. So it was a big 24 hours to see Djokovic win an Australian Open, and then to see a horse called Fielding Cross win a high weight race, which was probably a benchmark 68 out at Yarra Valley. It's nice to walk off the racetrack with pockets full of cash.
I think it's probably the first and only time we'll hear Novak into a race at Yarra Glen with a big win. So
it's a bit obscure.
It is.
Love it. I think that's it, Benny.
Yeah, that's all. Thanks for your time, Michael. We know Chief. When you speak, people listen, so thanks again for your time.
Good work, guys. Well done on the podcast.
Thanks, Chief. Cheers.